The frozen wind cut through Zelda Ashford's threadbare coat like 1,000 tiny knives as she stumbled down the main street of Winnemucca, Nevada, her teeth chattering so violently she feared they might crack. It was February 1882, and the winter had proven far more brutal than anyone could have predicted in this high desert town, where temperatures had plunged to deadly lows night after night. She had been traveling west for 3 weeks now, running from a past that offered nothing but servitude and pain, only to find herself stranded in this remote settlement with less than $1 to her name and nowhere to lay her head. The boarding house had turned her away when she could not produce payment in advance, and the saloon keeper had given her a look that made her skin crawl when she inquired about work. So she had spent the last hour wandering the darkening streets, watching her breath form clouds in the air, and feeling the cold seep deeper into her bones with each passing minute. The livery stable at the edge of town glowed with warm lamplight spilling through the cracks in its weathered wooden walls, and Zelda found her feet carrying her toward it almost against her will. She knew it was wrong, knew she had no right to trespass on someone else's property, but the alternative was freezing to death in an alley, and survival had a way of overriding propriety. She slipped through the partially open door, grateful that it made no sound, and was immediately enveloped by the blessed warmth radiating from the horses and the insulated space. The smell of hay and horse and leather filled her nostrils, familiar and oddly comforting despite her circumstances. She could hear the gentle sounds of the animals shifting in their stalls, the occasional snort or whinny, but no human voices, no indication that anyone was present to discover her intrusion. Moving as quietly as she could manage with her shivering limbs, Zelda made her way to the back of the stable where she spotted an empty stall that contained nothing but clean straw. She sank down into it, pulling her knees to her chest and wrapping her inadequate coat tighter around her body. The straw prickled through her worn dress, but it was infinitely better than the frozen ground outside, and the warmth of the stable felt like heaven after hours in the bitter cold. She told herself she would stay just until she stopped shaking, just until she could feel her fingers and toes again, and then she would slip back out before dawn and figure out what to do next. But even as she made these plans, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that came from weeks of travel, inadequate food, and the constant stress of not knowing where she would sleep or how she would survive. She must have dozed off despite her intentions, because the next thing she knew, someone was standing at the entrance to her borrowed stall, a dark silhouette backlit by lamplight. Zelda jerked awake with a gasp, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scrambled backward in the straw, prepared to run or fight or beg, whichever might save her. The figure stepped forward, and she saw it was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes and a heavy coat, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. For a terrible moment she thought he might yell, might throw her out into the cold or worse, call the sheriff to have her arrested for trespassing. "Please," she heard herself say, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Please, I know I should not be here, but I had nowhere else to go. I will leave. I will leave right now." The man did not move for a long moment, and then he crouched down so they were closer to eye level, though he kept a respectful distance. When he spoke, his voice was deep and surprisingly gentle, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent time in the Southern Territories. "Easy now. I am not going to throw you out into the cold. Name is Isaac Lawson. I own this livery." Zelda stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. She had expected anger, threats, demands, but not this calm acceptance. In the lamplight, she could see his face more clearly now, square-jawed and weathered by sun and wind, with eyes that held more kindness than she had seen in a long time. He looked to be somewhere in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, with dark hair that needed a trim and the beginning of stubble on his jaw. There was something solid about him, something steady that made her want to trust him even though every instinct she had developed over the years warned her against trusting anyone, especially men. "I am sorry," she managed, still poised to flee. "I am Zelda Ashford. I did not mean to cause trouble. I just needed somewhere warm for a few hours." Isaac nodded slowly, his gaze taking in her threadbare coat, her worn boots, the way she was still shivering despite the relative warmth of the stable. "How long have you been traveling?" 3 weeks, she admitted, not sure why she was telling him the truth. "I came from Carson City. I was working as a laundress there, but the family I worked for decided to move back east, and I could not afford the rent on my room without the job, so I thought I would try to find work here or in one of the mining camps further north." "And have you eaten today?" The question caught her off guard, and she felt her face flush with embarrassment. "I had some bread this morning." It was a lie, and from the look on Isaac's face he knew it. He straightened up, his decision apparently made. "Stay here. I will be right back." Before she could protest, he was gone, his boots crunching through the straw and then echoing on the wooden floor of the stable. Zelda sat frozen, unsure what to do. Part of her wanted to run, to disappear into the night before this could become complicated, before she found herself indebted to a stranger whose motives she could not discern. But the larger part of her, the part that was cold and hungry and so very tired, kept her rooted in place, clinging to the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, she had stumbled across someone who might help her without expecting something terrible in return. Isaac returned carrying an armload of blankets, thick wool ones that looked warm enough to survive a blizzard. He also had a bundle wrapped in cloth that he set down carefully in the straw beside her. "These blankets are clean. I keep them for the horses when they get sick and need extra warmth, but they will serve you better tonight. And this is some beef and biscuits from my supper. It is not fancy, but it will fill your stomach." Zelda looked from the blankets to the food to his face, trying to understand. "Why are you helping me? What do you want?" Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been hurt or understanding or both. "I want you to not freeze to death in my stable. Beyond that, I want nothing. I know what it is like to be alone and without resources in a hard place. 3 years ago, I was working as a ranch hand in Texas, barely making enough to feed myself, sleeping in the bunkhouse with 15 other men and dreaming of having something of my own. A man named Henry Cooper gave me a loan to come out here and start this livery, did not ask for anything but that I pay him back when I could. Took me 2 years, but I did pay him back, every cent. He showed me kindness when he did not have to, and I figure the least I can do is pass that on when I get the chance." She wanted to believe him. More than that, she needed to believe him, because the alternative was going back out into the freezing night, and she was not sure she would survive it. Slowly, she reached for the bundle of food, unwrapping it to find generous portions of still warm beef and 2 large biscuits. Her stomach growled so loudly it was almost embarrassing, and she saw the corner of Isaac's mouth twitch in what might have been an amused smile. "Go ahead and eat. I need to finish checking on the horses, but I will be around if you need anything. Tomorrow, we can talk about finding you something more permanent than a stall, but for tonight, just rest and get warm." He left her then, moving down the row of stalls to check on his charges, his presence reassuring rather than threatening. Zelda ate slowly, forcing herself not to wolf down the food even though every fiber of her being wanted to devour it in seconds. The beef was tender and well seasoned, The biscuits were fluffy and rich with butter, and it was the best meal she had eaten in weeks. As the food settled in her stomach, she felt some of her strength returning, enough that she could wrap herself in the blankets Isaac had provided and actually feel warmth seeping back into her limbs. She watched him work through half-closed eyes, noting the way he moved with quiet confidence, the gentle manner he had with the horses, speaking to them in low tones and running his hands over their legs and flanks to check for any signs of injury or illness. There was something peaceful about the scene, something that made her feel safer than she had felt in months. She tried to stay awake, tried to remain vigilant in case this all turned out to be some kind of trap, but the combination of food, warmth, and exhaustion proved too powerful. Her eyes drifted shut, and this time, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep that lasted until the first light of dawn began to filter through the stable walls. When she woke, disoriented and stiff from sleeping in the straw, she found a tin cup of water sitting near her head and a note written in careful, blocky handwriting. Had to run an errand. Back soon. Make yourself at home. Isaac. Zelda sat up, rubbing her eyes and trying to process the kindness this stranger had shown her. She was not accustomed to kindness without strings attached, had learned through hard experience that most people wanted something in return, but Isaac seemed different. Or maybe she was just desperate enough to believe he was different because the alternative was too bleak to contemplate. She drank the water, grateful for it, and then used a bit of it to wash her face and hands as best she could. She was acutely aware of how she must look, her dark hair hanging in tangles around her face, her dress stained and wrinkled from weeks of travel, her coat held together in places with makeshift stitching. She was 22 years old but felt ancient, worn down by the struggle to survive in a world that had little use for women without family or means. Her parents had died of fever when she was 16, leaving her to fend for herself, and she had moved from one position to another ever since, always one step ahead of destitution, and never quite able to get her feet under her. The sound of the stable door opening made her look up, and she saw Isaac entering with another bundle, this one larger than the first. He saw that she was awake and nodded a greeting. "Morning. Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, getting to her feet and brushing straw from her dress. "Thank you for the water, and for everything else. I do not know how to repay you." Isaac set down his bundle and turned to face her fully. In the morning light streaming through the high windows, she could see him more clearly, noting the small scar above his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands, the way his clothes were worn but clean and well-maintained. He had the look of a man who worked hard and took pride in his work, who had built something with his own hands and meant to keep it. "You do not owe me anything, but I have been thinking, and I have a proposition for you if you are interested in hearing it." Zelda felt her guard go up automatically, years of wariness making her tense. "What kind of proposition?" "The honest kind," Isaac said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I need help here at the livery. Business has been good, better than I expected when I started, and I have been trying to manage everything on my own. Feed and water all the horses, muck out the stalls, repair tack, handle the customers, keep the books. It is too much for one person, especially in winter when people want their horses kept inside and cared for rather than out in the pasture. I have been meaning to hire someone for months now, but I have not found the right person. You need work and a place to stay. Seems like maybe we could help each other." She stared at him, trying to find the trap, the hidden clause that would turn this offer into something ugly. What would the work entail? Mostly mucking stalls, feeding and watering horses, brushing them down when their owners bring them in or take them out. Some general cleaning and organization. I would pay you a fair wage, same as I would pay any hand, $25 a month plus room and board. There is a small room above the stable that I have been using for storage, but we could clear it out and make it suitable for living. It has a stove and a window and a decent bed. Nothing fancy, but it is warm and dry and private. $25 a month plus room and board was more than fair. It was generous. Zelda had worked for families in Carson City who paid her less than that for 12-hour days doing laundry and cleaning and cooking. And you would expect nothing else from me, just the work. Isaac's expression hardened slightly, and she saw a flash of something that might have been anger, though it did not seem directed at her. I am not that kind of man, Miss Ashford. I am offering you honest work for honest pay, nothing more and nothing less. You would have your own space with a lock on the door, and I would expect you to keep your work and your personal life separate, same as I do. If that arrangement does not suit you, I understand, and you are welcome to stay in the stable until you find something else. But I want to be clear that I am not asking for anything improper. She believed him. Against all her better judgment and years of cynicism, she believed him. There was something in his eyes, something steady and sincere that made her think he was exactly who he presented himself to be. I accept, she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could second-guess herself. I accept your offer and I thank you for it. I promise I will work hard. I am stronger than I look and I am not afraid of dirty work. The tension in Isaac's shoulders eased and he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made him look younger. Good. That is settled then. Let me show you the room and we can start clearing it out this morning. The stalls will need mucking later, but that can wait until after you have had a proper breakfast and a chance to settle in. He led her up a narrow staircase at the back of the stable, the wooden steps creaking under their weight. The room at the top was small, maybe 12 feet by 10 feet, with a slanted ceiling that followed the line of the roof. It was crammed with boxes and old tack and various items that had clearly been shoved up here when there was no other place for them, but Zelda could see the potential. There was indeed a small iron stove in one corner, a window that looked out over the main street of Winnemucca, and against one wall, a narrow bed with a straw mattress. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and dust covered every surface, but it was a room, a private space that would be hers alone, and that meant more than she could express. I know it needs work, Isaac said, sounding almost apologetic, but we can get it cleaned up quick enough. I will help you move these boxes down to the storage shed, and I have some clean linens for the bed. There is a basin and pitcher around here somewhere, and I can bring up some water from the pump. The boarding house has a bathhouse if you need a proper bath, and Mrs. Chen, who runs the place, is fair about the prices. Zelda walked to the window and looked out at the town, seeing it properly for the first time in daylight. Winnemucca was small but bustling, with a main street lined with wooden buildings housing various businesses. A general store, a saloon, a hotel, a bank, a doctor's office. She could see people moving about their daily business, miners and ranchers and townspeople going about their lives. In the distance, the snow-capped mountains rose against a brilliant blue sky, beautiful and harsh in equal measure. It was not the life she had imagined for herself when she was young and still believed in dreams, but it was a chance, and chances were precious things not to be wasted. It is perfect, she said, turning back to face Isaac. Truly, I cannot thank you enough. They spent the rest of the morning clearing out the room, hauling boxes and equipment downstairs and sorting through what could be thrown away and what needed to be kept. Isaac proved to be easy to work alongside, neither hovering nor leaving her to do everything alone, but rather working in companionable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. She learned that he had been born in Tennessee, but moved to Texas with his family when he was 12, that his parents had both died of cholera when he was 20, that he had an older sister named Martha who had married a shopkeeper in Dallas and seemed happy. He asked about her life in return, and she found herself telling him things she had not spoken about in years. Her parents' deaths, the various positions she had held, the constant struggle to make ends meet in a world that offered few opportunities for women on their own. "It is not fair," Isaac said as they swept the floor, sending up clouds of dust that made them both cough. "The way women are expected to manage without any support or help. My mother worked herself to the bone trying to keep our family afloat after my father got injured in a logging accident. Could not find decent work that paid enough to matter, could not own property in her own name, could not do half the things a man could do just because she was born female. Always bothered me, that inequality." Zelda paused in her sweeping, surprised by his words. Most men she had known either did not notice the struggles women faced or did not care, accepting the status quo as natural and unchangeable. "You are unusual, Mr. Lawson." "Isaac, please. And I do not know about unusual, just paying attention, I guess. And maybe having a mother and sister who I respected taught me that women are just as capable as men, given half a chance." By early afternoon, the room was transformed. The floor was swept clean, the cobwebs were gone, and the windows sparkled after a good washing. Isaac had brought up clean linens for the bed, a thick quilt that his sister had made, a small table and chair, and a lamp with plenty of oil. He also brought up some items from his own supplies: a bar of good soap, a brush and comb, a small mirror, and a change of clothes that he said had belonged to his sister and might fit with some alterations. Zelda accepted these gifts with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment, unused to such generosity and unsure how to respond to it. "You should rest for a bit," Isaac said once everything was arranged. "I need to head over to the general store to pick up some supplies, and then I will make us some dinner. We can start your training tomorrow when you are fresher." "Sound good. I can help with dinner," Zelda protested, not wanting to seem lazy or ungrateful. "Tomorrow," Isaac said firmly. "Today, you rest and settle in. You have been through a lot and you need time to recover. That is not negotiable." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted, the physical work of cleaning combined with weeks of poor sleep and inadequate food catching up with her all at once. After Isaac left, she sat on the bed, testing the mattress and finding it surprisingly comfortable. The room was warm from the heat rising from the stable below, and through the window, she could see the mountains and the sky and feel the afternoon sun on her face. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something like hope, fragile and tentative but real nonetheless. She must have fallen asleep again, because she woke to the sound of Isaac calling her name from the bottom of the stairs. The light outside had shifted, suggesting several hours had passed, and she could smell something wonderful cooking. She descended the stairs, still groggy from sleep, and found Isaac standing by a small cook stove she had not noticed before, set up in a corner of the stable where it vented through a pipe in the roof. He was stirring a pot that emitted rich, savory smells, and there was a coffee pot bubbling on another burner. "Hope you like stew," he said without turning around. "It is about the only thing I can make that is reliably edible." "Well, that and coffee, though mine tends to be strong enough to strip paint." "It smells amazing," Zelda said honestly, her stomach growling in anticipation. "Can I do anything to help? Grab those bowls from the shelf there, and we will eat right here. I usually take my meals in the stable so I can keep an eye on things." They sat on hay bales pulled up to a makeshift table made from a plank laid across two sawhorses, eating stew and drinking coffee so strong it made Zelda's eyes water. But the food was good, hearty and filling, and the company was even better. Isaac told her about the various horses currently in his care, their personalities and quirks, which ones were gentle and which ones had attitudes. He explained the routine of the stable, the rhythm of the work, the expectations of the customers. He spoke with passion about his business, about his plans to expand eventually, maybe buy some land and raise horses rather than just boarding them. "It is a good life," he said, looking around the stable with obvious pride. "Hard work, but honest. I like knowing that at the end of the day I built something, something that is mine that no one can take away from me as long as I keep working and paying my debts." "I understand that," Zelda said softly. "I have never had anything that was truly mine. Even my clothes are borrowed or second-hand. The idea of building something, owning something, it seems like an impossible dream." Isaac looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "It is not impossible. It just takes time and work and maybe a bit of luck. You are smart and capable, Zelda. I can see that already. Give yourself a chance to build something here, and I think you might surprise yourself." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she could be more than just a woman struggling to survive, always one disaster away from destitution. But belief was a luxury she had learned not to indulge in, a weakness that only led to disappointment. Still, sitting in the warm stable with a full stomach and a room of her own waiting upstairs, it was easier to hope than it had been in years. The next morning, Isaac woke her before dawn, knocking on her door and calling that it was time to start work. Zelda dressed quickly in the clothes he had given her, a simple work dress and a warm shawl, and braided her hair back to keep it out of the way. She found Isaac already in the stable, measuring out grain for the horses, and he handed her a pitchfork with a grin. "Ready to learn how to muck a stall?" It was hard, dirty work, harder than she had expected even though she had prepared herself for physical labor. Each stall needed to be completely cleaned, the soiled straw removed and replaced with fresh, the floor checked for any signs of problems. The horses needed to be fed and watered, their coats brushed, their hooves checked and cleaned. Some of them were friendly and patient, allowing her to work around them with ease, while others were skittish or stubborn, requiring careful handling. Isaac worked beside her for most of the morning, showing her the proper techniques, teaching her how to read the horse's body language, how to move confidently without startling them. By midday, Zelda's back ached, her arms trembled from the unfamiliar work, and she was fairly certain she smelled like horse manure and sweat. But she had also mucked 6 stalls, successfully groomed 3 horses, and earned an approving nod from Isaac when she handled a particularly nervous mare with patience and gentleness. They broke for lunch, simple sandwiches, and more of that paint-stripping coffee. And then, Isaac sent her back upstairs to rest while he handled the afternoon customers. This became their routine over the following weeks. Zelda worked hard, learning quickly and throwing herself into the tasks with determination. Her body adjusted to the physical demands, growing stronger and more capable. She learned the names and personalities of all the regular horses, which ones needed extra attention, and which ones preferred to be left alone. She learned how to repair simple tack, how to manage the books when Isaac was busy, how to deal with customers who sometimes doubted her abilities simply because she was a woman. Isaac always backed her up in those situations, making it clear that she was his partner in running the livery and deserved respect. As February gave way to March and the weather slowly began to warm, Zelda found herself settling into life in Winnemucca, in a way she had never settled anywhere before. The room above the stable became truly hers, personalized with small touches. Wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill, her few possessions neatly arranged, a patchwork quilt she was slowly making from fabric scraps Mrs. Chen had given her. She made friends with some of the other women in town, the shopkeeper's wife who always had a kind word, the schoolteacher who lent her books, the Chinese woman who ran the laundry and taught her techniques for removing stubborn stains. But it was Isaac who occupied more and more of her thoughts as the weeks passed. She found herself looking forward to their morning conversations over coffee, to the way his face lit up when he talked about the horses, to the rare smiles he gave when she made him laugh with some observation or story. She noticed things about him that she had no business noticing. The strength in his hands when he lifted heavy saddles, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. She noticed that he was kind not just to her, but to everyone, that he had a reputation in town as a fair man who kept his word and treated people with respect, regardless of their station. She told herself it was gratitude she felt, nothing more than appreciation for the man who had saved her from freezing to death and given her a chance at a new life. But gratitude did not explain the way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, or the way she found excuses to work near him even when their tasks did not require it, or the way she caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. It did not explain the jealousy she felt when Sarah Mitchell, the pretty daughter of the hotel owner, brought her horse to the stable and flirted shamelessly with Isaac, touching his arm and laughing at everything he said. Isaac was always polite to Sarah, but nothing more, keeping their interactions professional and brief. Still, Zelda could not help but notice that Sarah was exactly the kind of woman a man like Isaac should be interested in. Young, pretty, from a good family, with a dowry and prospects and all the things Zelda lacked. The thought depressed her more than it should have, reminding her of all the reasons why hoping for anything more than friendship from Isaac was foolish and dangerous. One evening in late March, after a long day of work, Isaac asked Zelda if she would join him for a walk. It was the first time he had invited her to do something that was not work-related, and she felt absurdly nervous as she changed into her better dress and tried to tame her hair into something presentable. They walked through town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Isaac pointed out various landmarks and told her stories about the town's brief history. Winnemucca had only been established a few years earlier, growing up around the railroad and serving as a hub for ranchers and miners in the area. "I like it here," Isaac said as they paused at the edge of town, looking out at the desert landscape stretching away into the distance. "It is rough and new, but that means there are opportunities. A man can make something of himself here without worrying too much about where he came from or who his family was, or a woman for that matter." "You ever miss Texas?" Zelda asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes," Isaac admitted. "I miss my sister, miss knowing the land and the people. But I do not miss feeling like I would never be more than someone's hired hand, never have anything of my own. Coming here was the best decision I ever made, even though it was scary as hell at the time." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last of the daylight fade from the sky. Then Isaac turned to her, his expression serious. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Zelda said, though she felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. "That first night when I found you in the stable, you asked me what I wanted from you. Like you expected me to demand something. Has someone hurt you, Zelda? Because if they have, if someone is after you or threatening you, I want to help." Zelda took a deep breath, considering how much to tell him. She had been carrying her past around like a weight for so long, never speaking about it to anyone, but something about Isaac made her want to be honest. No one specific. Just a lifetime of learning that men usually want something in return for their help. I had a position in Carson City before the laundry work, cooking and cleaning for a merchant family. The husband started making advances, cornering me in the hallways and saying things that made my skin crawl. When I refused him, he told his wife I had been stealing, and she threw me out without references or pay for my last month of work. I had another position before that where the son of the family thought I should be grateful for his attention and got angry when I was not. It has taught me to be careful, to assume the worst until proven otherwise. Isaac's jaw tightened, and she saw anger flash in his eyes. I am sorry you went through that. No one should have to deal with that kind of treatment. And I want you to know that you will never have to worry about anything like that from me. You have my word on that, for whatever it is worth. It is worth a lot, Zelda said softly, meaning it. You have been nothing but kind and respectful since the day we met, Isaac. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and you have never made me feel like I owed you anything beyond honest work. That means more to me than you know. They walked back to the stable in the gathering darkness, and Zelda felt something shift between them, some deepening of their connection that went beyond employer and employee. She knew she was in dangerous territory, knew that allowing herself to care for Isaac beyond friendship was asking for heartbreak. But as they said goodnight at the bottom of the stairs and his hand brushed hers, sending a spark of warmth through her entire body, she realized it might already be too late to protect her heart. April brought warmer weather and an increase in business as more travelers passed through town and ranchers brought their horses in for shoeing and care. Zelda and Isaac worked long days, often side by side, and their partnership grew smoother and more intuitive. They developed a rhythm where they could work in silence for hours, each knowing what the other needed without having to ask, but they also talked more, sharing stories and opinions and dreams. Zelda learned that Isaac loved to read but rarely had time for it, that he had a sweet tooth for peppermint candy, that he sent half his profits each month to his sister to help with her children's education. Isaac learned that Zelda had once dreamed of being a teacher, that she loved thunderstorms and hated spiders, that she had a beautiful singing voice that she only revealed when she thought no one was listening. The attraction between them grew stronger, at least on Zelda's part, though she tried desperately to hide it. She told herself that Isaac saw her only as an employee and maybe a friend, that his kindness was just his nature and not specific to her. But there were moments that made her wonder. The way his gaze lingered on her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, the way he always seemed to have some small gift for her when he went into town, a ribbon or a book or a sweet from the general store. The way he stepped closer than necessary when showing her how to do something, his body warm and solid beside hers. The way he always made sure she ate enough, that she was not working too hard, that she had everything she needed. One day in mid-April, a group of rough-looking men rode into town, the kind of men who carried their guns prominently and looked like they were searching for trouble. They brought their horses to the stable, and Zelda felt uneasy around them from the start. The way they leered at her and made crude comments, they did not bother to keep quiet. Isaac stepped between her and them immediately, his usually friendly demeanor cooling to something hard and unwelcoming. "The lady works for me, and you will treat her with respect or take your business elsewhere," he said, his voice level but with an edge that suggested he would back up his words with action if necessary. The leader of the group, a scarred man with tobacco-stained teeth, laughed unpleasantly. "No need to get riled up, friend. We are just admiring the view. Not often you see a pretty filly like her mucking out stalls." "The view is not for admiring," Isaac said flatly. "Now, do you want your horses cared for or not?" They backed down, as men like that usually did when confronted, but Zelda saw them exchange looks that made her nervous. After they left their horses and headed toward the saloon, she turned to Isaac. "Thank you for that. I could have handled it, but I appreciate you stepping in." "I know you could have handled it," Isaac said, still looking angry, "but you should not have to. Those men were out of line, and I will not tolerate anyone speaking to you that way, not in my stable." The intensity in his voice made her look at him more closely, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was not just protective anger. It was something more personal, more possessive. Before she could analyze it further, he turned away, his shoulders tense. "I am going to make sure they do not cause trouble in town. Will you be all right here for a bit?" "Of course," she said, though she felt oddly shaken by the encounter and by whatever she had seen in Isaac's face. He left, and she went back to work, trying to focus on the familiar tasks. But her mind kept returning to the way Isaac had stepped in front of her, the way he had looked at her afterward. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear the stable door open again, did not realize someone had entered until a shadow fell across the stall she was cleaning. She looked up to find the scarred man from earlier standing there, alone this time, with an unpleasant smile on his face. "Your boss stepped out, did he? Good. I wanted a chance to talk to you private-like." Zelda straightened, gripping the pitchfork tightly and positioning herself so the horse between them would make it difficult for him to reach her quickly. "You should leave. Isaac will be back any moment." "I do not think so. I watched him head over to the sheriff's office." "That gives us time to get acquainted." He moved closer, and Zelda saw that he had been drinking, could smell the whiskey on him even from several feet away. "A woman like you, working in a stable, living above it without a husband, I figure you are not too particular about your company. I can make it worth your while." Fear and anger warred in Zelda's chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I am particular about my company, and you do not qualify. Leave now, or I will make you regret staying." He laughed, taking another step forward. "You going to fight me with that pitchfork?" "I would like to see you try." Zelda raised the pitchfork, holding it like a weapon. She had grown up poor, had lived in rough places, and she knew how to defend herself when necessary. "I am warning you. One more step, and I will put this through your leg." Something in her tone must have convinced him she meant it, because he paused, his expression souring. "You are not worth the trouble anyway. When your boss comes back, you tell him he should keep a better eye on his woman if he does not want other men sniffing around." He left then, stumbling slightly as he went, and Zelda slowly lowered the pitchfork, her hands shaking with adrenaline. She stood there for a long moment, waiting for her heart to stop racing, and then she heard rapid footsteps and Isaac burst into the stable, his face pale with worry. "Zelda, are you all right? I saw that man leaving and he looked angry. Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "He tried to intimidate me, but I made it clear I was not interested in his company. He left." Isaac crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders gently, his eyes scanning her face. "Are you sure you are all right? Did he touch you?" "No, I am fine. Truly." But the adrenaline was fading now, leaving her feeling shaky and upset, and to her horror she felt tears start to well up in her eyes. "I am sorry. I should not be crying. Nothing even happened." "Something did happen," Isaac said firmly, his hands warm and steady on her shoulders. "That man threatened you, frightened you. You have every right to be upset." He pulled her into his arms then, carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Zelda found herself leaning into the embrace, letting him hold her while she steadied herself. He smelled like leather and hay and something that was uniquely him, and she felt safe in a way she had never felt safe before, protected not just physically but emotionally. "I should have stayed here," Isaac said quietly, his voice rough with self-recrimination. "I should not have left you alone." "You cannot be here every moment," Zelda said, pulling back to look up at him. "I can take care of myself, Isaac. I have been doing it for years, but I appreciate that you care enough to worry." Their faces were close, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel his breath warm on her cheek. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, saw his gaze drop to her lips and felt his hands tighten on her arms. But then he stepped back, releasing her carefully, and she felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. "Those men are staying at the hotel," Isaac said, his voice more controlled now. "I spoke to the sheriff, and he is going to keep an eye on them. They are only here for one night, passing through on their way to the mining camps. Tomorrow they will be gone, and you will not have to worry about them anymore." "Thank you," Zelda said, trying to match his return to normalcy, even though her heart was still racing from the near kiss. "I should get back to work." They worked in silence for the rest of the afternoon, but the air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. That night, lying in her bed and listening to the sounds of the horses below, Zelda replayed the moment over and over. The way Isaac had held her, the way he had looked at her, the way she had wanted nothing more than for him to close the distance between them and kiss her. She had been fighting her feelings for weeks now, trying to convince herself that what she felt was just gratitude or loneliness, or the natural result of spending so much time together. But she could not lie to herself anymore. She was in love with Isaac Lawson, completely and thoroughly in love with him, and that terrified her more than any rough stranger ever could, because love meant vulnerability. Love meant risking everything on something that might not be returned, that might end in heartbreak and loss. Love meant caring so much about another person that their happiness mattered more than your own, and Zelda had never had the luxury of caring about anyone but herself and her own survival. She did not know how to do this, did not know how to be the kind of woman a man like Isaac deserved. And she had no idea if he felt anything beyond friendship and protectiveness, if that moment in the stable had meant to him what it had meant to her. She decided to be more careful, to guard her heart better, to maintain appropriate boundaries. But Isaac made it impossible. Over the next few weeks, he seemed to seek out her company more than ever, inviting her for walks after work, sharing his meals with her, bringing her small gifts that showed he paid attention to her preferences and interests. He taught her to ride one of the gentler horses, his hand steadying her in the saddle, his voice patient and encouraging. They had long conversations about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions on some things and arguing good-naturedly about others. In early May, the town held a dance to celebrate the completion of a new church building. Isaac asked Zelda if she would go with him, and she said yes before she could think better of it, her heart soaring at the invitation even as her practical mind warned her not to read too much into it. She borrowed a dress from Mrs. Chen, a pretty blue thing that actually fit her well, and spent extra time arranging her hair. When she came down the stairs that evening and saw Isaac waiting for her in his Sunday best, his eyes widening as he took in her appearance, she felt beautiful for the first time in years. "You look stunning," he said, his voice slightly rough, and then he offered her his arm like a proper gentleman. The dance was held in the church's new meeting hall, with lanterns strung from the rafters and a small band playing lively music. It seemed like the entire town had turned out, and Zelda was greeted warmly by people she had come to know over the past 3 months. But she was most aware of Isaac beside her, his hand warm on her back as he guided her through the crowd, the way he stayed close even when others wanted his attention. When the music started, he led her onto the dance floor without hesitation. "Fair warning, I am not the best dancer," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "But I know enough not to step on your feet too often." He was better than he claimed, leading her through the steps with confidence if not elegance. Zelda, who had learned to dance from her mother years ago, followed easily, and they moved together with the same natural coordination they had developed working side by side. Other couples swirled around them, but Zelda barely noticed anyone else. She was entirely focused on Isaac, on the feel of his hand holding hers, on the warmth of his palm pressed against her back, on the way he was looking at her like she was the only woman in the room. "I am glad you came to Winnemucca," Isaac said suddenly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I know you ended up here by accident, by desperation, but I am grateful for whatever circumstances brought you to my stable that night." "So am I," Zelda admitted, her careful resolutions to guard her heart crumbling in the face of his nearness. "These past 3 months have been the happiest of my life, Isaac. You gave me more than just a job and a place to stay. You gave me a chance to be myself, to build something, to feel like I matter. I will never be able to thank you enough for that." His hand tightened on hers, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something intense and yearning. "Zelda, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right time, the right words, but I do not think there is a right time or right words for this. I care about you. Not as an employee, not just as a friend. I care about you in a way that keeps me up at night, that makes me want to give you everything, that scares me because I have never felt this way about anyone before." Zelda's breath caught in her throat, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Isaac, but before she could finish, the music ended, and other dancers crowded around them, separating them in the confusion of couples leaving the floor and new ones taking their place. Sarah Mitchell appeared at Isaac's elbow, smiling brightly and asking for the next dance, and Zelda found herself swept aside by the crowd, losing sight of Isaac in the press of people. She made her way outside, needing air and space to process what had just happened. Isaac cared for her. He had feelings for her beyond friendship. It was everything she had hoped for and everything she was terrified of, and she did not know whether to laugh or cry. She stood in the cool evening air, hugging herself and trying to calm her racing thoughts. "There you are." Isaac's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway, backlit by the lantern light from inside. "I lost you in the crowd. Are you all right?" "I needed some air," she managed. "It was getting warm in there." He stepped outside, letting the door close behind them, muting the music to a distant sound. They were alone in the darkness, with only the stars above and the lights of the town around them. Isaac moved closer, his expression serious and hopeful and nervous all at once. "What I was trying to say in there," he began, "what I have been trying to find the courage to say for weeks now, is that I love you, Zelda. I am in love with you. I think I have been since that first night when you were so determined to leave even though you were shivering with cold, so proud even in desperation. You are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I want more than just working together. I want everything. But only if that is what you want too. If you do not feel the same, if you want to keep things as they are, I will respect that. I will never make you uncomfortable or pressure you. But I had to tell you, had to let you know how I feel." Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming happiness. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I have been trying so hard not to, trying to convince myself it was impossible, that you could never feel the same way about me." "But I love you, Isaac. I love your kindness and your integrity and the way you see the best in people. I love how hard you work and how much you care about your horses, and how you made me feel like I was worth something when I had forgotten that myself." Isaac closed the remaining distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face gently, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You are worth everything," he said fiercely. "Do not ever doubt that." And then he kissed her, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. It was her first real kiss, the first time she had let anyone this close, and it was perfect. It felt like coming home, like finding something she had not known she was searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers and laughed quietly. "I have been wanting to do that for so long," he admitted. "Every time I saw you, every time you smiled at me, I wanted to kiss you. But I did not want to rush you, did not want to make you feel like my help came with expectations." "You never made me feel that way," Zelda assured him. "You have been nothing but respectful and kind. But I am glad you finally kissed me, because I have been wanting it too." They stayed outside for a while longer, talking quietly and stealing more kisses, both of them giddy with the relief and joy of finally admitting their feelings. When they returned to the dance, walking hand in hand, Zelda saw several people smile knowingly, and she realized that their feelings had probably been obvious to everyone but themselves. They danced several more dances, and Isaac held her closer than propriety strictly allowed, but Zelda did not care. She felt like she was floating, like everything in her difficult life had led to this moment, to this man, to this chance at happiness. The next few months passed in a blur of work and courtship. Zelda and Isaac were inseparable, working together during the day and spending their evenings talking, walking, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. Isaac courted her properly, bringing her flowers and taking her on picnics, and treating her with a combination of romance and respect that made her fall more deeply in love with him every day. The town accepted their relationship without much comment, most people seeming pleased that the hard-working livery owner had found someone. In July, during a particularly beautiful sunset, Isaac took Zelda up into the foothills outside town, to a spot overlooking the valley with a view of the mountains in the distance. They sat on a blanket he had brought, eating cold chicken and bread and watching the sky turn colors. When the last of the light was fading, Isaac turned to her and took both her hands in his. "Zelda Ashford, I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my partner in every way that matters, my best friend, the person I want to see first thing every morning and last thing every night. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me?" Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you. I would be honored to be your wife." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver with a small blue stone, and slipped it onto her finger. "It is not much," he said apologetically, "but I wanted you to have something." "It is perfect," Zelda said, looking at the ring and then at him. "Everything is perfect." They married a month later, in the same church where they had danced and Isaac had first told her he loved her. Zelda wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen and the other women in town had helped her make, and Isaac wore a new suit he had ordered from San Francisco. His sister Martha made the trip from Dallas with her family, and Zelda was moved by how warmly they accepted her, treating her like the sister they had always wanted. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with the whole town in attendance, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Isaac kissed her, Zelda felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They spent their wedding night in the room above the stable that had been Zelda's home, but Isaac had transformed it while she was getting ready at Mrs. Chen's house. He had filled it with candles and wildflowers, had brought up his own larger bed to replace the narrow one, had hung curtains on the windows and added personal touches that made it clear this was now their space, not just hers. They came together tentatively at first, both nervous despite their deep love for each other, but the nervousness gave way to passion and tenderness in equal measure. Isaac was gentle and patient, making sure Zelda felt cherished and safe, and when they finally lay in each other's arms afterward, both of them overwhelmed by the intimacy and emotion of it all, Zelda knew she had made the right choice. "I love you, Mrs. Lawson," Isaac whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I love you too, Mr. Lawson," she replied, snuggling closer. "Thank you for finding me that night, for giving me a chance, for loving me. Thank you for being brave enough to sleep in my livery stable," he said with a soft laugh. "Best thing that ever happened to me." They settled into married life with ease, their relationship not changing much on the surface since they had already been living and working together. But there were new intimacies now, small moments of connection that deepened their bond. Waking up in each other's arms every morning, stolen kisses during the workday, conversations that lasted late into the night. Zelda was happier than she had ever imagined being, feeling secure and loved in a way she had never experienced before. In October, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She had suspected it for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Isaac. When she finally did, over dinner one evening, he stared at her in stunned silence for a long moment before letting out a whoop of joy and pulling her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby. Truly, truly," she confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "In the spring, around April or May, we will be parents." Isaac was attentive and protective throughout her pregnancy, insisting she rest more and work less, though Zelda continued to help at the stable as much as she was able. They spent the winter preparing for the baby, building a cradle, gathering supplies, choosing names. Isaac wanted to name a son after his father, and Zelda suggested her mother's name for a daughter. They argued good-naturedly about it, both excited about the prospect of becoming parents even as they acknowledged their nervousness about the responsibility. In late April 1883, just over a year after Zelda had first stumbled into the livery stable seeking warmth, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, attended by the town doctor and several of the women who had become Zelda's friends. But when she finally held her son in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. Isaac sat beside her, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and child, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. They named him Thomas William Lawson, honoring Isaac's father while giving him a strong name of his own. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, with his father's dark hair and his mother's eyes. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, taking on more of the stable work so Zelda could rest and care for their son, but also insisting on doing his share of the baby care, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, changing his diapers without complaint, singing to him in an off-key voice that nevertheless seemed to soothe the infant. The years that followed were full and happy. The livery business continued to thrive, allowing Isaac and Zelda to save money and eventually expand, buying the vacant lot next to the stable and building a proper house with multiple bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a parlor. They kept the room above the stable, though, maintaining it as a guest room and a reminder of where their story had begun. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic child who loved the horses and followed his parents around the stable as soon as he could walk. 1885, they had a second child, a daughter they named Rose Marie, who had Zelda's dark hair and Isaac's stubborn streak. The four of them made a happy family, working together to run the business that had grown from Isaac's dream into a successful enterprise that employed 2 additional hands by the time Thomas was 5. Zelda never forgot where she had come from, never took for granted the security and happiness she had found. She and Isaac often talked about that first night, about the series of chances and choices that had led to them finding each other. "What would have happened if you had not come to check on the horses that night?" Zelda asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their house, watching their children play in the yard. "What if you had come in the morning instead?" "I do not know," Isaac said honestly, pulling her close. "But I am grateful every day that I did come that night, that I found you when I did. You were so determined, so fierce even when you were freezing and desperate. I think I started falling in love with you right then, even though I did not realize it yet." "I thought you were going to throw me out," Zelda admitted. "I was so scared, but also so tired of being scared, so tired of always being one disaster away from having nothing. And then you brought me blankets and food and gave me a room and a job, and you never asked for anything in return except honest work. You gave me back my dignity, Isaac. You gave me a chance to be more than just a woman struggling to survive. You gave me more than I gave you," Isaac said firmly. "You gave me a partner, a family, a reason to build something bigger than just a business. You made my life complete in ways I did not even know it was incomplete." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Nevada mountains, their children's laughter filling the air. Zelda thought about the scared, desperate woman who had sought shelter in a livery stable more than 6 years ago, and she marveled at how much had changed. She had a home now, a real home filled with love and laughter. She had a husband who cherished her, children who needed her, work that challenged and satisfied her. She had friends and community and a place where she belonged. The journey had not always been easy. There had been struggles along the way, difficult births and sick children and harsh winters and business challenges. But through it all, they had faced everything together, Isaac and Zelda, partners in every sense of the word. They had built something beautiful from that first night of desperation and kindness, a life that neither of them could have created alone. Thomas ran up to them, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can we go check on the new foal? Please?" Isaac laughed and ruffled his son's hair. "In a bit, son. Let your mama and me finish watching the sunset, and then we will all go together." Rose toddled over as well, climbing into Zelda's lap and sticking her thumb in her mouth. Zelda held her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling Isaac's arm solid around her shoulders. This was everything she had never dared to dream of during those long, hard years when survival was her only goal. This was home. This was family. This was love. "Thank you," she whispered to Isaac, "not for the first time and not for the last. For everything." "Thank you," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For saying yes to a cowboy who did not have much to offer except blankets and a room." "You offered me everything that mattered," Zelda said. "You offered me hope and kindness and a chance at happiness. You offered me yourself, and that was more than enough." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and their children chattered about horses and tomorrow's adventures, Zelda Lawson closed her eyes and sent up a prayer of gratitude for the cold February night that had driven her to seek shelter in a livery stable, for the man who had found her there and seen not just a trespasser but a person in need, for every moment that had led to this perfect, ordinary evening surrounded by her family. She had come to Winnemucca with nothing but the clothes on her back and desperation in her heart, and she had found everything she never knew she needed. The years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of family life and hard work. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning the business from his father and showing a natural gift for handling horses. Rose proved to have her mother's determination and her father's kindness, helping around the stable and the house with equal enthusiasm. In 1890, when Thomas was 7 and Rose was 5, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. And in early 1891, they welcomed twin girls, Emma and Anna, who filled the house with double the noise and double the joy. The livery business continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in northern Nevada. Isaac's reputation for fair dealing and excellent care of animals brought customers from miles around, and Zelda's business acumen helped them invest their profits wisely, buying property and investing in other local businesses. They employed 4 regular hands by the mid-1890s, and the operation had expanded to include not just boarding but also horse trading and breeding. But despite their financial success, Isaac and Zelda never forgot their humble beginnings. They were known in Winnemucca for their generosity, helping newcomers to town get established, extending credit to people going through hard times, and always willing to offer a meal or a warm place to stay to those in need. More than once, a desperate traveler found shelter in their stable, just as Zelda once had, and each time, Isaac and Zelda made sure to offer not just basic necessities but genuine kindness and help getting back on their feet. "We were given grace when we needed it most," Zelda told their children when they were old enough to understand. "Your father gave me grace that cold night, and before that, a man named Henry Cooper gave him grace with a loan that started this whole business. We have an obligation to pass that grace on to others who need it." The children took the lesson to heart, growing up generous and hardworking, aware of their blessings but never taking them for granted. Thomas eventually took over more and more of the day-to-day operations of the livery, allowing Isaac to pursue his dream of horse breeding more seriously. Rose married a young lawyer who came to Winnemucca to start his practice, and they built a house just down the street, so Zelda got to see her daughter and grandchildren often. The twins, Emma and Anna, proved to be inseparable partners in everything, eventually opening a successful dress shop together in town. As Isaac and Zelda grew older, moving into their 40s and then 50s, they watched with pride and satisfaction as the life they had built together continued to flourish. Their children were happy and successful, giving them a total of 11 grandchildren over the years. The business they had started with just the two of them now provided employment and livelihood for multiple families in the community. The love they had discovered that cold winter night had only deepened and strengthened with time, growing into something unshakable and eternal. On their 20th wedding anniversary in August 1903, Isaac took Zelda back to the spot in the foothills where he had proposed, the same view of the valley and mountains spread out before them. They were both grayer now, with lines on their faces that spoke of years lived fully, but they still held hands like young lovers, still looked at each other with the same warmth and devotion they had felt at the beginning. 20 years, Isaac marveled, shaking his head. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I found you shivering in my stable, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever." "Both are true, I think," Zelda said, leaning against his shoulder. "Time is strange that way, but I would not change a single moment, Isaac. Even the hard times, even the struggles, they were all worth it because we faced them together." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come to Winnemucca that winter?" Isaac asked. "If you had chosen a different town, if you had found shelter somewhere else?" "Sometimes," Zelda admitted. "But I think we were meant to find each other somehow. I think all the difficult things in my life before that night were leading me to you, to this place, to the family we built together. I was meant to sleep in that livery stable, and you were meant to bring me blankets and a room and, eventually, your heart." Isaac turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "You have made my life extraordinary, Zelda Lawson. You took a simple cowboy with a small business and big dreams and gave him purpose and partnership and love beyond measure. I hope you know how much you are loved, how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." "I know," Zelda said, tears of happiness blurring her vision. "Because I feel the same way about you. You saved my life that night, Isaac, in more ways than just keeping me from freezing. You showed me that I was worthy of kindness, worthy of love, worthy of a good life. You gave me everything I had stopped believing I could have." They sat together as the sun set, just as they had so many times over the years, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing each other completely. Their story had started with desperation and cold and fear, but it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. A young woman with nothing had found shelter in a livery stable, and a kind-hearted cowboy had offered her blankets and a room and, in doing so, had found his soulmate. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Isaac and Zelda headed back down to town, to the house they had built, to the family they had created, to the life they had earned through hard work and unwavering love. And if you had asked either of them whether they believed in fate or chance, in divine providence or simple luck, they would have told you it did not matter. What mattered was that they had found each other, had chosen each other, and had built a love story for the ages out of one cold winter night and one simple act of kindness. Their remaining years together were peaceful and happy, filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with the satisfaction of seeing the business and the family continue to thrive. They grew old together gracefully, never losing the deep connection that had formed between them from that very first night. And when people in Winnemucca told the story of Isaac and Zelda Lawson, as they often did to illustrate what was possible when kindness met with courage, they always started the same way. She slept in the livery just to stay warm, and the cowboy brought her blankets and a room, and from that simple beginning they built a love that lasted a lifetime. It was true in every possible way. Zelda had come to that stable desperate and alone, seeking only survival, only warmth to get through one more night. Isaac had seen her not as a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be exploited, but as a person in need, worthy of help without condition. That single act of compassion had changed both their lives irrevocably and created a legacy that extended far beyond just the two of them. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they had modeled: hard work, integrity, generosity, and above all, the understanding that everyone deserves kindness and second chances. The livery business that had started as Isaac's modest dream became an institution in Winnemucca, lasting well into the 20th century. The house they built remained in the family for generations, a testament to what could be created when two people worked together toward a common goal. But more than the business success, or the financial security, or even the large, loving family they raised, what Isaac and Zelda created was something intangible but infinitely precious. They created a love story that proved redemption was possible, that past hardships did not have to define your future, that one moment of genuine human kindness could change everything. They showed that you could start with nothing but need and compassion, and build a life of meaning and beauty. When Isaac passed away in 1921 at the age of 70, surrounded by family in the house he had built with Zelda, his last words were of gratitude for the life they had shared and the woman who had shared it with him. Zelda, heartbroken but sustained by 63 years of love and a lifetime of cherished memories, lived another 5 years, during which she was cared for devotedly by their children and grandchildren. She spent those final years telling stories of their life together, making sure the younger generations understood where they had come from and what values had built their family's foundation. When Zelda died peacefully in her sleep in 1926 at the age of 68, she was buried beside Isaac in the Winnemucca Cemetery under a simple headstone that read, "Isaac and Zelda Lawson, united in love, November 1881, partners in life, in death, and forever." At her funeral, attended by what seemed like the entire town plus family members who traveled from across the country, their oldest son Thomas told the story of how his parents had met, of the cold winter night and the livery stable and the blankets and the room that had started it all. "My father saw a person in need and offered help without asking for anything in return," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother had the courage to accept that help and build something from it. Together, they showed us all what love really means, what partnership really looks like, what a life well lived really is. We are all here today because of one moment of kindness on a February night in 1882, and I think that is the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind." The story of Isaac and Zelda Lawson became part of Winnemucca's local history, passed down through generations as a reminder of the town's early days and the kind of people who had built it. The livery stable where they met eventually gave way to more modern businesses, but the house they built remained, carefully preserved by the family as a connection to their roots. And in that house, in a place of honor in the parlor, they kept 2 items that represented the beginning of everything. A faded wool blanket, one of the ones Isaac had given Zelda that first night, and a simple silver ring with a blue stone, the ring he had slipped on her finger when he asked her to be his wife. These items, along with the countless photographs, letters, and mementos accumulated over their long lives together, told the story of 2 people who found each other against impossible odds and built something extraordinary from that chance meeting. It was a story of survival and kindness, of love and partnership, of the ordinary miracles that happen when people choose compassion over indifference and hope over despair. Because in the end, that is what their story really was, a testament to hope. Hope that even in your darkest moment, kindness exists. Hope that you can build a future regardless of your past. Hope that love is possible even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Hope that one person, one moment, one choice to help rather than turn away, can change the course of multiple lives and create ripples that extend far beyond what anyone could imagine. She slept in the livery just to stay warm, seeking nothing more than survival through one brutal winter night. The cowboy brought her blankets and a room, offering help without condition or expectation. And from that simple exchange, from that meeting of desperate need and generous spirit, grew a love story that spanned decades, created a family that thrived for generations, and proved that sometimes the greatest treasures in life come from the most unexpected places, arriving when we need them most, often dressed in the humble clothes of simple human kindness. Their story reminds us all that we never know when our moment will come, when the kindness we show or receive will change everything. It reminds us to be like Isaac, to see the humanity in others and offer help when we can. It reminds us to be like Zelda, to have the courage to accept help when we need it, and to build something meaningful from the opportunities we are given. Most of all, it reminds us that love, true love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond, often begins in the most ordinary of circumstances, requiring only open hearts and the willingness to see possibilities where others might see only problems. And so the legacy of Isaac and Zelda Lawson lived on, not just in their descendants who carried their names and their values forward, but in the very spirit of Winnemucca itself. A town built by people who understood that survival in harsh conditions required community, compassion, and the willingness to help your neighbor when they needed it most. Their story was Winnemucca's story, the story of the American West, the story of what humans can achieve when they choose love over fear, generosity over greed, partnership over isolation. In the records of the town, in the memories of its oldest residents, in the stories told by families gathered around dinner tables, the tale of the woman who slept in the livery and the cowboy who brought her blankets, and a room lived on as inspiration and reminder. It lived on as proof that fairy tales do not only exist in books, that happy endings are possible in real life, and that sometimes, if you are very lucky, a cold winter night and a stranger's kindness can lead to a lifetime of love and a legacy that outlasts you both.